Let's talk about this FTC lawsuit because this is a big deal. We've talked about Lena Khan and the FTC quite a bit. You also have Cantor and the DOJ antitrust division. This administration has been very strong in terms of antitrust. In fact, it's completely revived the theory of antitrust that existed prior to the 1980s and Reagan administration adopting the Robert Bork version of antitrust, which limited the question of monopolies and finding something to be an illegal monopoly and an illegal antitrust down to the question of whether it saves the consumer money or not. And very hard to predict that in the final analysis when you allow for a monopoly. But B, it completely discounts all the other reasons why you don't want a monopoly in our society. It is bad for competition. It creates wealth inequality.
Yep.
It diminishes the power of labor.
Makes working conditions more difficult for them as well.
100%. And so the change in just perspective, in ideology, in the definition of what the standard should be to determine that something is an illegal monopoly have changed under this administration. That permeates also the judges, because the judges get that notion, because there's a flexibility here, and we've seen it. But this is the first time, more or less in my lifetime, I was a young kid, when antitrust has been, has been adopted in this format, whether it helps workers or whatnot.
Well, Lena Khan, just to say for me, I was born in 94, right? Probably the best agency chair of my lifetime, like better than anyone in Obama or Clinton administration.
Well, certainly in the context of antitrust, there's nothing, we haven't seen anything like this from Obama or Clinton. Federal Trade Commission has sued to block, this is a $25 billion merger between Kroger and Albertsons. Most of these are in the Midwest, I think, and maybe out west. We don't really have these in the Northeast anyways, not that much. Maybe, I'm not sure. But one of the grounds for the lawsuit, now we should say there are 3 lawsuits. The FTC's now, there is one in Colorado, I think brought by the state, and one in Washington state. DC. And so there's 3 different lawsuits. And to actually have this merger go through, you would have to now, if you're Kroger and Albertsons, overcome and win all 3 of these lawsuits. But the FTC suit is essentially foregrounding the idea of monopsony. And that being not just that when Kroger's and Albertsons get together, maybe they, it becomes a monopoly. They have too much market power within, other supermarkets around. But that as a buyer of labor, because they will be essentially a monopoly over buying labor. When you have a monopoly over buying, it's called a monopsony. It then diminishes the power of unions to negotiate. It points to potential harms to labor markets and affirms that the bargaining table between unions and employers is a relevant antitrust concern. This is David Dayen and Luke Goldstein writing in the Prospect. United Food Commercial Workers, I should say, inciting the opposition of the United Food and Commercial Workers to the merger, the FTC argues that unions can successfully pit competing grocery store chains against one another as a strategy to gain leverage during bargaining negotiations. If you don't have multiple companies that are running supermarket chains, you can't pit them against each other in terms of creating leverage in your negotiations. FTC pointed out in its announcement, union grocery workers' ability to leverage the threat of a boycott or strike to negotiate better CBA terms would also be weakened. By eliminating the current competition for union grocery labor between Kroger and Albertsons, the proposed acquisition will prevent the unions from being able to play them off each other during collective bargaining negotiations, substantially increasing Kroger's negotiating leverage. In other words, one of the problems of a monopoly in this instance is that you also, in terms of buying labor, in this instance, you also have a monopsony, and that diminishes the power of labor. There are other issues in terms of like no poach agreements and just simply their the impact on consumers. There won't be any competition, but the idea that they're citing this labor component as an important part of this antitrust action is
exciting.
Is exciting and important. They had done this apparently in the context of Penguin House and Simon and Schuster, the concept of monopsony, right? Because there's fewer publishing houses to essentially buy books. You're a publishing house. You're a buyer when it comes to writers. You're a seller when it comes to the consumer, and the on the buy end. They would have a monopsony, and so it was shut down here. Here we're seeing it in the really an explicit a part of the agenda by the FTC is to maintain unions' strength in terms of having leverage over management, and that's really important.
Yeah. It's really important that they're taking a much more holistic, monopsony-focused, lens towards the market, as opposed to just seeing monopolies as in some way affecting the consumer, because we see now it's just insufficient to analyze the strengths of some of these corporations that can provide the lowest prices but still be economically harmful in other ways because they just have the power to do so.
Yeah,
like these big chains like Walmart, et cetera.
Ultimately, it's a question of democracy. It's a question of wealth inequality. It's a question of, protecting workers and protecting us as citizens, not merely in the one sort of sliver of us as consumers.
Yeah, as workers, too.
And exactly. All right, let's move on.